Hi, IBD. I'm Meredith Heyman. This is Industry Insights. Thanks so much for joining me. Investors had a bearish reaction to Snap's fourth quarter earnings, with revenue missing Wall Street expectations. Joining me to discuss the social media landscape and what's next for the company is tech analyst Deborah Aho Williamson. Deborah, thanks so much for joining me.
It's great to be here, Meredith. Thank you.
So let's start with those earnings reports. Give me a little bit of a overview of what we saw for Snap.
Yeah, so Snap actually came in fairly close to its guidance for revenue. It was right in the midpoint of where it generally was expecting to be. However, it like its competitors had a tough 2022. 2023 was looking a little bit better. But unfortunately, the recovery and the amount of revenue that this company generated in the quarter and for the full year just didn't meet investors' expectations. We saw brand ad revenue in the quarter fall by 3%. Direct response revenue grew also by 3%, which basically meant that overall advertising revenue was flat. And the growth that we saw in the quarter came almost entirely from the subscription revenue that Snapchat generated from its new subscription program, Snapchat Plus. So overall, that's a good sign. You always like to see with a company new revenue streams coming in and the ability to grow revenue, which it has in a new revenue stream. But unfortunately, what happened with Snap during its earnings just didn't live up to investor expectations, and probably on a bigger, more macro sense, it didn't live up to what Meta did in the quarter. And I think what we're seeing now with Snap is sort of a unfortunate reality of comparison to a giant of a company that had a monster of a quarter.
Right. As you said, it didn't live up to Meta, but Snap wasn't alone. With Pinterest disappointing results, definitely compared to Meta's stellar results. So what is Zuckerberg and co, if you will, what are they getting right now?
Well, again, Meta is enormous. Meta is a critical platform for advertisers around the world, and Meta makes it very, very easy for advertisers to buy advertising on its platforms. Its advertising manager is world class. Snap and Snapchat are also, they're very important to people around the world. They're an important advertising platform, just like, Pinterest is, but they're smaller. And when an advertiser is looking at where to invest and where they might need to make adjustments, sometimes they're looking at those platforms that just are a little bit smaller, maybe not quite reaching the target audience that they're looking for, and they might be making adjustments or reductions in spending on those smaller platforms. So that's, I think, where we're seeing a company like Snap and also Pinterest these days when you compare them to a giant like Meta.
How do they compare to this other social platforms in terms of being competitive?
Well, again, in terms of revenue, far below. Snap's quarterly revenue was about 1.4 billion. If you compare that to Meta was much, much larger. Meta's revenue was leagues larger than Snap's revenue in the quarter. So, again, much smaller base of comparison. Some might say that's not fair. I think it's worth talking about the fact that Snap and Snapchat have a huge lock on the youth audience. They're used by 75% of young people ages 13 to 24, which isn't nothing. Meta's platforms, particularly Facebook, have not seen that sort of dominance in the youth market in a very, very long time. So, if you look at things like that, Snap's doing okay. It's definitely got a lock on that all-important youth audience. It just needs to get bigger somehow. And I think that's what I'm going to be looking for in the quarters to come.
Sure. And as we've said, this isn't kind of anything new. The Snap stock has been falling sharply since 2021. So now how is the company repositioning, redirecting to turn things around, change the picture, if you will?
Yeah, well, there's a few interesting things that are happening that they've talked about in their investor letter and also on the earnings call. So, the first thing is the Snap is really leaning more into direct response advertising. So, what does that mean? Direct response advertising is advertising designed to elicit an immediate response of some sort, a click, a purchase, a lead, something like that. And Snap primarily has had focused on brand advertising. It's been really doubling down on the tools that it offers to these direct response advertisers, and that's helping to make Snap's revenue and direct response grow. So Snap's going to be leaning into that. I mean, why not? It's if it's working, why not continue leaning into it? So we'll see more and more direct response, performance-based advertising for advertisers on Snap in the quarters to come.
Another tool, AI. How is Snap implementing the technology into its overall strategy?
AI it's
Everything.
everywhere, right? I mean, you cannot bat an eye without hearing a company talk about AI. It's an interesting one for Snapchat because Snapchat was born with AR, augmented reality. And so what we're seeing now with Snap is a bit less AR and a lot more AI.
Why?
So yeah, so we see AI taking the form of machine learning to again make those advertising algorithms perform better, get better results for advertisers, show better content to users, get them to stay on Snap longer, and then also there's My AI, which is Snapchat's kind of unique generative AI tool. It's got its own chat engine where users can talk to the AI chat and ask questions. Snap hasn't talked about that too much on the earnings calls, but eventually this could become a revenue source for the company. So I expect it to lead more heavily into all of these aspects of AI in the coming year.
Yeah. Are there any other compelling use cases that we can talk about when it comes to AI in terms of Snap's overall strategy?
Well, I mean, again, like, making ads perform better is something that definitely Snap will need to lean into. That's something that has already proven to be really successful for Meta. Meta has an advertising program called Advantage Plus that is AI driven, that has performed really, really well for Meta. It essentially makes ads perform better, more efficiently, and potentially for lower cost. So to the extent that Snap can lean into that, that's going to be super successful for the company. Again, adding AI features for users is something else where I see social platforms making more and more headway. We're already seeing it on Instagram, on WhatsApp, on Messenger, on Facebook, where users can use filters and image generation tools and chat with avatars. There's definitely more and more intersection of social media and AI, and I fully expect that Snapchat will follow along this year.
Now, when it comes to Snap growing its user base, they're kind of changing focus, right? And shifting to wanting to grow more in North America and Europe rather than the rest of the world. What's going on there?
Yeah, that was a puzzler for me. So, just to rewind, several years ago, Snap talked about wanting to reach older audiences. So, it already knew that it had a lock on the youth audience that I talked about earlier. But in order to grow, Snap wanted to gain users in, people older than, say, mid 30s. That didn't work so well a couple years ago. So Snap decided instead that it was going to focus on outside of regions outside of the US and Canada and Europe. So for the past several quarters, Snap's seen really strong growth in what it calls its rest of world region. For example, in the quarter, daily active users in that region were up by 35 million year over year versus just 4 million in North America and Europe combined. So to hear Snap then say in its investor letter and on its earnings call that it was going to pull back from that rest of world focus and focus again more intensively on driving engagement and usage in North America and Europe really tells me that it's going to once again try to reach that older audience, again, something slightly above, say, age 35, where it's already been pretty successful in that younger age group. I'm not sure how Snap's going to do it. Its platform is very unique, and young people love it. I'm not sure where this older audience is going to come from, but I think Snap knows that most of the revenue comes from North America and Europe, and so to the extent that it can improve usage and engagement patterns in those two regions, perhaps that will attract more advertisers to use Snap and to be more loyal to it going forward.
Well, we will have to wait and see, and we'll be watching, Deborah.
Yep, so will I.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining me. This is Industry Insights. I'm Meredith Heyman. Thanks for watching IBD. We'll see you next time.